The Follies of the Western Mind. A few words before we begin. I want to explain how the book's structured and explain why you need to know that. So where should we start? Well, let's start with a question. How do we make the world better? I wrote this book to try and answer this question because it's been bothering me for a long time. At the start, I actually wanted to answer a slightly different question. I wanted to try and understand why societies don't respond to climate change as they should. Don't worry, this is not a book about climate change. There's more than enough of those already, some of them even written by me, and none of them have had the slightest effect. I started off looking at climate change, though, before I widened the question. Why do societies not fix climate change? Why do societies not do what they should generally? Why don't they make life better for people? Why is there so little vision and so little optimism about the future? Why are so many governments, especially in the West, actively making life worse for many people year after year? And that's what this book's about. It's about why societies don't do what's needed to solve a wide range of completely obvious social problems or respond effectively to many ecological challenges. It's about what stops societies shifting onto a better path and what we can all do about it. I'm going to argue that societies don't do what they should because of the way people think, or because of how they don't think. People are not thinking, especially in the West. Put another way, the thinking of people who live in the West has become trapped. If I try and use the latest buzzwords, there's no Salulu to lots of problems because so many people are Delulu. If Western societies can change how they think, they can begin to make life better for people. Let me come back to the climate change just for a moment, because it offers a perfect example of what I'm talking about. We know that the pace of climate change is accelerating. The concentration of harmful gases in the atmosphere is at its highest ever level and still rising. We're within a decade of a situation getting completely out of control. Unless we do something soon, further temperature increases will be impossible to control. We know all this. And yet societies still don't do anything to fix the problem, even although we know what to do. Why have societies allowed this to happen? When I first started trying to answer this question, I thought that the cause lay with the Western economic system. The economic system compels societies to focus on endless growth and not on the welfare of people or the planet. Of course, there was another reason for inaction. Humans by nature don't like big changes, especially if it means a lot of upheaval. There's also a lot of people with vested interests who've been blocking change. Stopping climate change is not in the interests of the oil and gas industry. Boosting average living standards would mean taxing businesses and the rich more, and trying to achieve world peace is not in the interests of the weapons industry. And so a lot of things that should happen don't happen. There's an inbuilt resistance to change that blocks action. If rich world societies taxed businesses more and stopped consuming so much, their economies would shrink. And they think that that would be a disaster. So even although everybody would be much better off in the long term, almost no one wants to do that. There's also lots of misinformation, and that blocks change too. People are told that climate change is not that serious. They're told that war is sometimes necessary, and that taxing the rich simply doesn't work. Some people deliberately sow seeds of doubt because it's in their interests. Just as the tobacco industry did many years ago, the food industry, the plastics industry, the pharmaceutical sector, weapons producers, and the fossil fuel industry spend huge amounts of money today playing down the impact of their activities and sowing seeds of doubt in people's minds about the long-term consequences of what they do. It's a well-worn playbook. After a while, I came to see that none of these explanations was quite sufficient. Behind them all was something else. It's not just misinformation, a fear of change, or the growth-obsessed Western economic system that stops societies moving forward more positively, that stops societies moving onto a better and more sustainable path. There was something else. After a lot of work, I came to see that it's the Western worldview that's the biggest problem. It's the way people in the West think about the world that stops societies responding to the big social and environmental challenges and to climate change as they should. It's the Western worldview that blocks change. To put that another way, if people in the West can change the way they think, they can move ahead more positively. And that's what this book's about. It's about how the Western worldview stops societies from making the changes that are necessary. It stops societies from making life better. Okay, but what do I mean when I say worldview? Well, everybody has a view of the world, a way of interpreting reality. It's not something we're born with. It's something that we all learn. As we grow up and experience the world, we form a view of it. We build a picture of what happens around us in our heads. We build a picture of reality, our own reality. Everyone's is different. We each think that our own worldview is correct. If we thought it was wrong, we'd change it. We think that it's correct and that it's internally consistent, even although we know that it's different from everybody else's. My sister's worldview is completely different from mine, but both of us think we're right. Of course, she's completely wrong, obviously. There are also collective worldviews. There's a British view of the world and a Chinese view of the world and a German view of the world, with the peoples of each nation sharing a lot of common ideas. Some people, like the British, think that it's perfectly normal to put carpets in the bathroom and have separate hot and cold taps. And other people think that's just weird. They put tiles on the bathroom floor and have mixer taps. Some people, many in Asia, think that it's perfectly normal to visit the graves of their ancestors every year. Others don't give much thought to their ancestors at all. Some people think state control is best. Some people think democracy is better. What's important to understand is that there's no objectively correct worldview. There's no absolute truth. Everyone's worldview is simply a set of opinions and values. It's a set of beliefs, much like a religion. Once they're established, worldviews are generally hard to change. It's hard to persuade people to change how they think, to change their opinions, especially after they've reached their mid-20s and their view of the world has become relatively fixed. Worldviews tend to become quite fossilized. Collective worldviews do change, though, at least in the long term. Many centuries ago, for example, most people in Europe believed that the earth was created by one God. They thought the world was flat and that it lay at the center of the universe. Today, most people think differently, thanks to scientific discovery. But that too has limits. What's regarded as a scientific fact by one generation can be completely different for another. Until comparatively recently, scientists didn't know anything about radiation, and they thought that the Earth was only a few tens of thousands of years old. Now they have a different view. It's our worldview, our belief system, that lies at the center of the Western world's inability to respond to its social and environmental problems and to climate change. Societies don't do what they should because most people in the Western world have a worldview which makes the sort of change that's needed completely impossible. It's just too hard for most people to accept that their fundamental ideas might be wrong, that their thinking might be delusional. It's too hard for them to see that the push for economic growth is the source of the environmental problems, that peace doesn't come by fighting more wars, that the economic system is going to increase inequality, migration and unemployment even more, that individual freedom is not what it seems, and that technology is not going to fix every problem. They can't accept that societies will have to change much more radically if they really want to prosper. Until people think differently, nothing will change and the downward spiral will continue. Put that another way, making things better is easy. All people need to do is change the way they think. And that's what this book is about. It's about how people can change the way they think and help build a better world. Because once we change how we think, the next steps are relatively easy to see. A few words about the structure of the book. This book doesn't give you a better way to think. It doesn't say, here's a different way to think, adopt it and you'll feel better about everything. It doesn't say, think like this, you fool, it's so much better. Because that wouldn't work at all. It'd be like saying red is better than green. It wouldn't convince you about anything. What the book does instead is explore the whole subject by stealth. It explores the theory of thinking. Now that might sound pointless, so bear with me. The book examines this thing that we call thinking. What is thinking? What calls on us to think? If you think about it, it's quite hard to explain. We all think constantly, and yet defining what thinking is really hard. Something we've done since birth, probably from before birth actually, that's gone on since the dawn of time, and we still don't really know what thinking is. Strangely, not much has been written about thinking, about what it is. There are very few books on the subject. One I've referred to quite often in the book was written nearly 80 years ago by a philosopher called Martin Heidegger. But I'll also refer to the works of many other thinkers and philosophers, both ancient and modern. To explore the subject of thinking, I've broken it down into several sections. The first part looks at the physical process of thinking, about what we know about the brain during thinking. And the answer is not much. The second part explores what I've called the ethereal aspects, the ideas that are very hard to define and understand. What is the mind? What is consciousness? These are difficult questions, and of course, there are no clear answers. But by asking some questions, as you'll see, it takes us a little bit further. Then we'll look about how thinking can be boxed in, how it can be captured and imprisoned by people who want to make you think in a particular way. We'll look at how common worldviews have been constructed in the past, how thinking has been deliberately shaped to make people conform. The fourth section looks at how thinking is shaped by language. The way we think is hugely affected by the languages we speak. And at the end, I'll bring it all together, though even here, I won't give you a map to better thinking. Instead, in all these sections, I'm going to drop in ideas into the flow of the discussion, which I hope will make you think. Small challenges to conventional Western ideas, little prompts. There are also lots of questions in the text that don't have clear answers, because learning that the answer is not clear is sometimes helpful too, as I hope you'll see. If only a few of these ideas or a few of these questions stop you, just for a moment, and make you say to yourself, I need to think about that, then we'll be making some progress. If you begin to question your ideas just a tiny bit, or wonder if things are less clear-cut than you thought before, then there's a chance that a bigger process will have begun. Because once you doubt one of your central pillars of thought, it's much easier to question another. And that makes it much easier to wonder if the whole structure of your mind is not quite right. It opens your mind to alternative ways of thinking and starts a process. I do hope you find this book interesting. I hope it makes you think.